and good morning and welcome. Today is the first of our Ask Me Anything. It's Ask Me Anything about data. My name's Lamara and this is my colleague Andy.
Hey. So, good morning. You right?
I'm very good. I'm a little bit nervous.
Yeah,
I feel like
I'm,
what are we, like Phil and Fern on this morning?
Phil and Holly, maybe.
Yeah, not as glamorous.
So today is all about data. You can ask us anything. I think you're going to get more value for your money if you're asking us about data.
So anything, are you sure?
I think so.
Okay.
We welcome stupid questions. But yeah, I think there's some obvious things that we're doing a lot about data and data strategy at the moment. And part of my role as a cloud solution architect here at Wirehive is talking to people about data and technology and how it can really transform businesses. So people out there doing good in the world is something we're really passionate with, working with forward-thinking companies, doing something with good purpose. And yeah, data is a massive key thing to help them do the best they can. So yeah.
Should we kick off?
Let's kick off, yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm going to ask, it may seem like a stupid question or a silly question.
So you've got a question.
But no question is silly, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what is data?
Well, it's the obvious one to start with, I suppose.
Start easy.
Yeah, so data, there's a perception shift that we're looking at really when we work with people with data. So data can be just the physical electrical signals that are stored on a hard drive or stored on a device somewhere. That is the definition of data. But what we try and change the perception is to switch that to data is just knowledge. Data is knowing. Data is the ability to learn something or to learn something new specifically with insights and look back maybe historically in hindsight, looking at sort of foresight and sort of predict what's going to happen in the future. Data unlocks so much of that that's really what data should mean to people, but far too often it is just ones and zeros stored on a hard drive somewhere, and it's treated as such. So data strategy for some people might be making sure it's secure and making sure it's governed, rather than actually thinking how can we completely transform our business and be much more successful as a company by using data in the most effective way. So that's data.
So is having a lot of data a good thing?
You need some amount of data, but I think all of us have got that. Every company out there is a data business now, is how we talk about it. So generally everyone's got enough data to do something decent with their data, but more data doesn't necessarily just mean more value. It's not a commodity in its own right. So we look at the value from data is one thing that we talk about quite a lot. So a lot of people compare data to oil, for example. Yeah. Literally everyone that's done my role and stood up and talked to people about data before has that slide, oil refinery or something in the background, and they talk about data is the new oil. We're kind of past that now because I think that's a really tired analogy, and I think it's far more valuable than oil. I think there's been reports in the last 5 years or so from Gartner, for example, that have talked about it being far more valuable than any fossil fuel because everyone's data is unique to their business. Mm-hmm. You don't get a variety of oil that's so well tuned to the inner workings of your business, whereas data is exactly that. So if you want to learn more about your customers, if you want to manufacture things in a much more efficient way, whatever you do, data is the fuel really to drive that to be a much better process than it was before.
So we have data all around us. I guess most people will be familiar with kind of data in Excel, through CRM systems. That will be what a lot of people will consider data. Is there other sources that you can bring in, maybe third party, that would be, that can help complement your own data?
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone has data, and there's data in terms of third party data, exactly that, open source data that everyone can get their hands on, really. So if you're an events management company and you've got all your data in your CRM, you've got all the customer events that you've run, and you know how successful they were because of how much money you made. If they're outdoor events, you might want to compare the open source weather data, for example, so you can pull all of that in and see if the weather was affecting the patterns, and maybe even for sales data or something like that, if you're completely outside of that industry, just how sunny it is might affect someone's willingness to buy a product, regardless of it being a sort of an outdoor event or anything like that. So yeah.
The sun always makes me happy.
Weather's
anyway.
Always a really interesting one to start pulling in, no matter what you're doing.
And obviously, kind of like economic change is really important. Think about today and COVID. Do you think businesses that are using data to their advantage are going to be, more well equipped to deal with COVID and future events like this?
Yeah, so economic change in particular, when we're talking about recessions, it's obviously a difficult time for everyone. the companies, particularly scale-ups and more agile, smaller companies, always have the biggest success in tough times like this. You see the likes of the Blockbusters and versus Netflix or even LoveFilm at the time, which was the main competitor, right? The people that reinvent themselves and use data to do that in the most effective way by really analysing their customers and spotting new opportunities to do things differently, they're the ones that come off the back of a recession or difficult times, difficult kind of trouble times like this, come off the back of that with much better success than they could have done before. Because it really squeezes that market and allows someone to spring out of that with a whole new way of working, which is always really exciting for the consumers as well.
So many businesses must be going through some difficult times right now. I'll encourage anyone that's kind of listening live today and checking out the channel. If you have a question, please do feel free to write it in the live chat box. That's what we're here to do. Andy and myself are here to kind of facilitate and answer those questions. Obviously, it is quite an open forum, so I understand if perhaps you feel nervous about that, but, we are quite a safe room. Obviously, if you would rather follow up with email, then again, we're open to kind of any questions that you might have. We're here to kind of help and guide you in any way that we can.
See Matt Lintot's in the chat. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Matt.
He's put no question is silly, and then Matt Lintot has entered. Ask a question, Matt. I'm sure you've got more than enough questions to ask, and otherwise it would just be us rambling on about what we know about things, but I'd rather be here to sort of serve people's questions, really, right?
So something I was thinking about, Andy, obviously, when it comes to data, it's like, where do you start? You want to do something with your data, you want to improve your business and how maybe you're working with customers and just your own way of working internally. Would you stress to customers that they need to have a data strategy?
Data strategy is a big thing, so if we're going to get into that now, this could easily serve the rest of the time that we have, but I'll try and keep it succinct. So data strategy is huge. We're putting so much work into data strategy at the moment here because far too often we've had kind of simple conversations with people about things, but it's never been a formalized process. Or nowadays we've got a sort of a rubber stamped seal of approval kind of our framework for how to do a data strategy well. And we've after years of working with clients on individual projects and ad hoc kind of consulting at maybe a CTO level or that kind of thing, we're now able to have this data strategy piece, which is a product of work that we can go and completely revolutionize the way people use data. But if you were getting started with data, you're probably already on that journey. So phase one, probably you have data in silos from different systems that you use. You might have a CRM, you might have a HR system. Mm-hmm. Companies all have these tools. Mostly they're in the cloud, they're software as a service or something like that. And the data that's in them is stored in a very separate way. IT manage it, and most of the time nobody's doing anything else with it. It goes in there to serve its primary purpose. But
so is accessibility an issue, do you think? People that don't get the hands-on to the data, is that currently a challenge? Yeah,
when we talk about availability of data, that's generally not just on the infrastructure that's got a highly available standard that it's online all the time, but actually the availability of data is, can you as a partner account manager in Wirehive actually touch the data that's relevant to how we're doing business? So I know here we've obviously done a lot in the last 5 years or so, especially to completely change that and make sure that you in your role have access to that kind of data. You have the sales forecasting reports that the board use exactly the same. You can see it in your own way. I can get my hands on that data if I need it to as well. Everyone is empowered to come up with their own ideas. And for a business to get from siloed data, where nobody has access to anything, can't physically touch the data, to a point where everyone's empowered and it's in everyone's hands, is quite a difficult journey. There's cultural change that you need to have there. I think when you onboard someone, part of their induction needs to be, these are the data sets that will be relevant to you. Here's how the rest of the team are using it. Feel free, and we encourage you to do something completely different if you can come up with a better way of doing it. That's the kind of thing that needs to change for someone. But yeah, first steps is understanding that just having data and just storing it as its primary use, just as the data that serves the purpose of the CRM and nothing else, is kind of a bit of a sin in this day and age. And I think any company that's doing that and is not being data driven and not using it further down the line and putting it in people's hands to report off that is gonna fail, really. It's gonna see competitors flying ahead and it's going to get left behind. Yeah,
well, thank you, Andy. I think we're going to come back to how you become data driven, but we've got our first question. So hello, Rob, and thank you. So he's going to kick us off with the first question of the day from our outside audience. So Andy, what's an exciting example that you've seen recently that was only possible due to the use of data? Can you share some insights?
Ooh. I mean, we do lots of data in our workshops. So I have the absolute pleasure of working with all kinds of clients in different industries, agency partners that developing crazy software that's at the forefront of this kind of technology. And one of the workshops we did, we talked about the sort of a marine biology, marine ecosystem, using data of imagery to track and understand and identify individual whales, dolphins, and other things in the seas. Is particularly of interest to me. I think that's awesome, and I think there's a wider project that's now part of the AI for Earth. This is a Microsoft thing that they're running, that means that anyone, professional or otherwise, if you're on holiday somewhere and you go out on a whales and dolphins boat trip or something like that, and you take a picture of a pilot whale in the Canary Islands, that data gets sent into this database. Wow. If you want to send that in. And they'll take anyone's photos, from professional sort of marine biologist photography and consumer photography, and they're combining that all in a massive data set to be able to track individual animals across the globe now with the same technology, which is just fascinating. And yeah,
and people just like you and I can get involved in that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, that is something that is just unthinkable sort of maybe 10 years ago, but the fact the AI is joining the dots there to make it worthwhile to all of a sudden encourage that massive data set. That workload wasn't feasible for charities to do that 5, maybe even 3 years ago. But because the hyperscale cloud vendors that we work with are kind of democratizing that technology to making it available for everyone, making it affordable and feasible to use, no matter how small your budget is, there's a way of getting started, and that's what's really driving the forefront now and making data such a key strategic point in any business, because you can do so much with it. And you've got it, you're just not using it well enough. And that's where data strategy comes in.
Right. And Andy, you touched on artificial intelligence there. Do you think that's the future of data?
Yeah.
No Terminators, though.
No, so there will be. We'll get to that. I'm sure there's the cognitive intelligence side of things where human life is at risk from technology at the end of the day. But we don't do that yet. But there's another side of AI, which is the narrow AI, which is can some automation or can some slight intelligent services that are built just as sort of very capable software, can that help me be more efficient in my day-to-day role? Mm-hmm. And that is what we're using on a day-to-day basis here and helping our customers make use of. So that is not a future thing, that is a now thing. In fact, if anything, it was last Tuesday or last year. So if you're not already doing anything with that kind of artificial intelligence, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Andy. So we have another question from the audience. So thank you for sending this in. In your experience, do clients understand the value of data? It goes on to say, I know a company who deleted all of their Sitecore analytics information, despite having a great value for understanding outside of their website.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
Yeah.
No, in a nutshell, I think certainly at the start of the journey with us, a lot of people don't truly understand the value of the data and think it's expensive to store, relatively speaking. I think that's got a lot cheaper in the last few years as well, which helps. But far too often, companies are just either archiving and leaving their data on a tape somewhere and not actually putting it anywhere useful, or like the question says, like they've deleted it and there's no way of rebuilding that and getting that back. Imagine having history of analytics data for Sitecore, which is a website, CMS. Imagine having all of that data on your customers, exactly what they clicked on, what they did, how their journey was through the site. That's quite upsetting that they've deleted that, because imagine they'd be kicking themselves now. But
so data needs to be treated as a first-class citizen.
Yeah,
like, what's the first rule for that, Andy? How can you go about treating it like that?
It's treating it as a strategic asset, really. So successful businesses have assets. They turn insight and information into products, and whether that is something as simple as they have a Sitecore platform for their e-commerce site, they've got customers interacting with that, and their data is sitting there, for example, to take this specific example from the question, you can then take that analytics data and put that in a live dashboard, so the team that are working, the e-commerce team, can see live people interacting with the site at the time. they can spot anomalies there just using human intelligence, or they can build artificial intelligence to spot anomalies to say, looks like some people may be having issues with the checkout because we're getting less conversions even though traffic is up, that kind of thing. And then you can then look at the historical data. If you don't delete it, look at the historical data there and build reports that can help with forecasting, capacity planning for growing the platform, look at kind of untapped opportunities of how you could grow the solution. There's limitless kind of possibilities off the back of that. So yeah, it's understanding the value in what you can do. But yeah, don't delete your psychoanalytics data. That's really key.
And I guess what's going to be really important is kind of being able to use this data. You said to use it to your advantage. You need to obviously get your hands on it. Is there a better way to be able to visualize data in real time so that people can make decisions quicker and better? Yeah,
so real time. There's all kinds of dashboard software out there that you can have. For example, our support team at Wirehive have a bright gauge dashboard that they look at, which is streaming real data in from our ticketing system, and they can see in real time what's happening. If there's any queues there that are struggling, because there's countless roles that they're all in, so they're experts in all kinds of different things, and they can switch in a very agile way to adjust to make sure that they're meeting the demand of whatever the customer cases that are coming in. So that's a great example. So
they can use it to change their priorities and
yeah, absolutely. So you can react in that real time, assuming the data there is real time, like ours is. Real time dashboards is a no brainer, and then obviously that data is there for doing reporting off the back of that. So on a monthly basis, you might look back at what the trends were, try and predict what's maybe an up and coming type of request from a customer for training and development purposes, for the skill set of the team, all kinds of things. But it's only that underlying data, if you're storing it the right way, making it accessible to then ask questions of it is how it becomes valuable.
Yeah, great. We've spoken about accessibility a little bit and people being able to use it better. Like, what is the first thing you should be doing to make it accessible?
So it's really important to have data as kind of a, like you say, a first-class citizen at the table in the boardroom, really. So whether you've got a CDO that's specifically responsible for data or part of one of the other roles, but data needs to be considered as valuable as any other kind of practice within the business. So having someone that's accountable and responsible really helps. A lot of businesses, like I say, they'll have IT that's responsible for the data, and it's just a focus of securing it and making sure it's governed. But other businesses,
the use of it, right?
Yeah, other businesses might have a data analyst team or a business intelligence team who manage the insights within that data and then distribute that back up to the board. And again, it's about understanding for your business what you want to do with it. So most businesses now, we open their eyes to what's possible, want to go a step further than that, and they want to have the business intelligence practice being done at every level of the business. Every department, every person has access to their own reports, their own dashboards, and they have the same information that the board is having on a monthly, quarterly basis, but they have it every single day that they can look at and make sure that when they come into work, everyone wants to do a good job, right? Unless there's probably be a few people out there that don't, right? But typically, if you're in a really good job that you enjoy, you want to do well, and having that data available to you makes sure that you know you're doing the right things and you're making a success of it. So that really helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we're talking about accessibility, but what about governance? The more people accessing data, can that cause problems for a business?
Yeah, it's a change to how you govern it. So giving more people access to the insights and the data doesn't mean you just turn off the security and let everyone have access, sort of like Wild West. It's not about that. So it's about, if anything, securing it better, having a better design around the security and the governance up front to make sure that people can ingest what they need to without breaching any kind of or compromising any security or control. So yeah.
So having a look at some questions that we've just thinking about here. I guess one thing that we would love to plug to everyone that's listening today, and hopefully you're finding the session of interest, but we have a very exclusive, I have to say that, it is a very exclusive session that's happening on the 21st of October. Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about that session and what to expect at that data strategy workshop? Yeah,
so the data strategy workshop, we're taking where we might work with a client of ours for over a number of weeks on working on the data strategy. We're kind of condensing the knowledge of that and the wisdom into a day. And it's going to be a fairly intensive workshop. There's lots to kind of take away from that. But It's really for a select few clients that want to, or a handful of clients that want to come along and kickstart that journey. So really understand how they're doing it wrong compared to other businesses out there and how to become a more data-driven organization. So it's really exciting.
It sounds like a really nice bite-sized entry into the world of data and data strategy.
Yeah, it's going to be intense doing it in a day. I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, it's going to be, it's a lot of work is going into making sure that it doesn't just leave people completely sort of mind blown and sort of in a difficult place. Like, we're going to put together a broken down version of our data strategy assessment, so people can sort of assess where they are versus the rest of the people in the room. And there's a bit sort of a networking part of it as well to understand. So you'll be going through with a collective of people really that are all there for one common purpose, which is to sort of understand that we could be doing things better, and today is the day to make some real change. So it's a hugely exciting thing for me to be able to be a main part of that to help businesses completely revitalise the way they do it.
That sounds really exciting. So there's definitely more to come from Wirehive regarding the data strategy in a day workshop happening in a few weeks' time. I guess, Andy, from my perspective, just working with some of the agencies that we have, we get a lot of opportunity to see some of their clients and what they're doing with the data. We have a lot of clients in financial services or utilities. They're really big industries at the moment that, can get affected. We've spoken about economic change and COVID and how that's affecting people. But other demands, so like vulnerable people, how can you, make sure that you use that data in a way that you can identify those people that need more help? I guess it's really exciting, all the good that you can do with data.
Yeah, I think you've just triggered a question about COVID as well. So we've got a question about COVID. It's having a big impact, and how do we feel data and AI can help organisations mitigate some of that damage?
Great question.
Yeah, I think COVID in particular, if you look at the remote working, seems to be the obvious thing to talk about. So lots of businesses out there aren't as well geared up to do remote working. Maybe there's not that inherent trust in their employees if they're in a remote scenario or something like that. And data can obviously help with that. But more importantly, it's looking at the kind of performance of the business. So one thing that was really interesting here is that, rightly or wrongly, maybe it's not such a great thing, but our productivity went up initially in lockdown. And I think that if you look at the staff, that was the staff putting in extra hours from my perspective, the people that I work with and I was seeing at the time. People were working longer shifts to try and make sure the business was good and getting things done. We're a small company and we kind of expect everyone to have that kind of attitude, although we try and discourage people from working too much. But a lot of businesses don't have that. A lot of businesses would have people that maybe take liberties because they're at home and they can get away with it. So looking at the productivity of your business and the success of every role, if you've got reports and insights and everything for how well the business is doing, it doesn't matter whether people are in the office, out the office, you'll be able to see how well things are running in the business. So if you've got that level of kind of, KPIs in a dashboard for every single department, you can spot when that's affected and you can see in real terms if there has been an impact, and then you can look to mitigate that. So from a very kind of basic level, looking at performance of businesses in COVID, that can obviously be a massive thing. And we've got people sadly being sort of made redundant and furloughed and things like that across various sectors as well, that data and artificial intelligence can help with that kind of thing. So I think it's important for anyone that's been in a position where they have been made redundant or been put on furlough or something like that, they look at their role and look at their use of artificial intelligence potentially and things like that to make sure that they are doing things as effectively as possible. It's kind of like you have your own blockbuster moment here and you can come back and you can reinvent yourself and reinvent the way that you carry your role out and become the Netflix of what you do. Yeah, exactly. It's a time to reinvent, just like it is for the companies.
Yeah.
And I think there's a huge opportunity in all of these hard times for people to grasp technology, frankly. If you look at Uber, Airbnb, all of the greatest, most successful companies in the last decade really have been based on the data and using the latest technology on top of that to be more successful versions of the companies that were trying to do the same thing before.
So businesses that aren't necessarily technology businesses have had to become technology businesses to take advantage.
Yeah, and I think every business out there is a technology business now, and completely changed our role in the world as well. So we used to be there to serve the needs of people that wanted a server or something like that. And now we're consulting people on how to just be better at their own business. Fantastic. Which is much more fun.
Well, since we've been talking, we've had a flurry of messages, so thank you. Keep them coming in. A great question here. Do you feel Azure or AWS are leading in terms of machine learning? So Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS. Obviously, at Wirehive, we are cloud agnostic, as we like to say. We work with Microsoft very closely, likewise with the likes of Amazon and GCP, as well as lots of other different technology vendors. Andy, I know that you are an avid Microsoft expert.
Yeah, I'm a Microsoft fanboy, to be fair.
Completely.
But like we say, I work in an agnostic environment, and before using Microsoft technology, I did use AWS here. So I think it's a great question. In terms of the technology, I think something we always tell people is that if someone has a slight advantage, if AWS bring out a new service, Microsoft will be there within months, if not weeks, and vice versa. So in terms of the technology, I think you could basically do anything you need to with either of the platforms. And we're in a situation now where even within the Microsoft stack that I use, if someone comes with a particular challenge that we need to solve, there might be 10 ways of doing that well with the Microsoft tools, and you just need to choose the most appropriate one, rather than you have to use this vendor because they've got the one service that works. I really don't think we're in that kind of scenario. And it's particularly with machine learning, more often than not, it's not out of the box and it's a custom thing that you're writing in Python or something that is completely open source, and the Microsoft stack is open source just as much as the AWS one is. So,
and there's lots of APIs, right?
In terms of who's leading, I think for me, I'm going to say Microsoft for the rest of the stuff that you get. So Microsoft are very engaged. They're a very sort of human organization, which you might not have thought of if you knew Microsoft of maybe 10, 20 years ago. And they are, much more engaged in the projects. There's reasons we, before lockdown, were doing events at Microsoft HQ more than we were at Amazon HQ. But if you're watching, hit us up, because we are trying to sort those out. And it would be good to do some virtual events with you guys. But yeah, for me, Microsoft is leading the way because maybe I've got more exposure to that, and I see that every week there's a new thing. But it's the package that you get with that. You can speak to their product teams, and they're much more open and engaged and willing to see the success of the project through. It's really exciting. Yeah,
but that's great though. I guess between companies though, the competition between them, the rate at which they're developing new tools is pretty similar in that regard. So I guess from our perspective, it's if you're not using AWS or Azure, then you probably need to choose one and just get started. Yeah,
we've got clients on GCP, but I think the shift, particularly if you look at things like BigQuery and Google had a really good market share when big data first came in, maybe 10 years ago or so. But I think the competitive spirit of Microsoft and just the sheer scale of Amazon in the market have driven them both ahead. And I think there's a reason the question says Azure or AWS, because GCP is great for certain things, but I think if you look at some of the latest technologies from Amazon and Microsoft, they are directly competing with each other, and
certainly a two-horse race.
It's a two-horse race, yeah.
Great, thank you, Andy. So a question from Matt. A lot of companies don't tend to value older data that they might hold, and some completely clear down that older data to reduce the cost of holding it and also the risk of GDPR. Can it be valuable to anonymize the older data? Yeah,
absolutely. So anonymizing data sets is something you want to look at if you're doing analytics on any kind of information that might have personal information in anyway. So in a nutshell, yes. So older data, you want to, rather than just be thinking, oh, I have to store it for 7 years and it's cheaper to stick it on a tape somewhere and archive it off. You want to be looking at where is the value to your businesses and what challenges are you going through? What's the 3-year goal that you're desperately trying to hit? And look at that data from that perspective. So how can that data help you achieve those goals? How can it help you with challenges and transform your business? And then from that way of looking at it, create a data platform that you're looking at for insights and analytics that is maybe the central hub of how you think about data. So there'll be systems that feed into that. It gets stored in a way that you can do a retrospective analysis on the last 12 months or however long you think is appropriate for your business. And then more of like an archive storage that you can pull through data for doing longer term sort of hindsight. So yeah, you need to need to think about data in a completely different way than it gets stored in this system because that's Sitecore, it does the website, and after it's done in there, we either delete it or we keep it and keep paying for the storage. There needs to be another solution that is the data solution that from Sitecore and everything else, and from social media, from Twitter, people messaging your company's Twitter handle and things like that, you pull in all the data that you can, combining and overlaying that and learning things that are completely new. That's the approach.
Great. So we've got quite a few questions to get through. One from Rob. There are many tools available such as Power BI, Tableau, QuickSights and BrightGauge, and that's just to name just a few. How can I determine which one is right for my organisation? Great question.
It's a great question. So we do a lot with Power BI. Power BI is very open. Again, you wouldn't expect it from Microsoft a long time ago, but that can hook up to basically any type of data. We've not come across anything yet that you couldn't pull into Power BI. So if you're going to use anything just off the bat, and you haven't got any kind of existing practice, then start with that. If you're already using Tableau, they're similar kind of technologies. So keep going with Tableau if you want to. If that pricing model and the commercials work with you, then it's fine. If you're getting started from scratch and you're using AWS infrastructure, then QuickSight is a great example of something that can plug really quickly into a lot of the AWS data storage services. So that is a no-brainer to start, and I think the cost of that is based on the consumption. So it's kind of a pay-as-you-go version rather than an individual license per user. Mm-hmm. It's just how many people are engaging with it, how many reports were generated, how much data was pulled in. So that is a cost-effective way of starting on something like AWS. Level. Yeah. But I
think cost is always a challenge, right?
Yeah, it needs to be. There's no point saying that everything is just really valuable, you need to do it and just ignore the cost. It's all got to be relative. So how much is your data worth is really how much value you're getting out of it. If you're doing things well, the cost should be an absolute no-brainer. It shouldn't be a consideration. But getting started, it will be a consideration because you're not getting those insights just yet. You need to do some groundwork. You need to set things up and understand where the value is in that data. So it's about doing the strategy work first, discovering the data and building a solution that is going to be an absolute no-brainer in terms of the return on investment there. And
just on that, actually, we have a question from James Ralph. So how do you get started if you wanted to implement a data strategy right now, today?
Well, you come to our workshop next month. I know James will be there anyway, hopefully. Yeah, the data strategy, in terms of how to get started, if we're going to give away some of our ideas, which I think is something we always like to do anyway, there's no secret sauce here. It's just about our experience and our customers that we work with, right? So understanding the value in data we've covered. It's for me is really about that evolution of BI, so about putting it in the right hands of people, understanding and defining the principles as you as a business, how you want to operate. And to do that, you need to know what's possible. So the workshop or working with a partner that is really experienced in putting together data strategies for people is really key. And it's easy for us to say that, but I'm not a salesperson. I'm a tech person, and I think that is really key to work with us or anyone like us that has the experience of understanding technology and data in terms of business context, which is really unique. I think far too many companies out there will tell you the best services to use and will sell you some Office 365 licensing and printers and toners and things, but we, as quite a specialist kind of niche consultancy, are very unique in the way that we first want to know about your business and what your goals are and what you're looking to achieve. And every technology decision that we make is relative to that. It's about understanding, almost taking us as part of your team. And for that month that we do a consultancy strategy on for your data or something like that, however long we're working with a client, we're an integrated part of their team. We're in the board meetings if we need to be. We're doing stakeholder workshops across a business to understand how it affects every single person in the business if we need to make sure that the technology stack and our experience of working with technology and the latest stuff from Microsoft and AWS is being used in the best possible way throughout their business to make sure that they're the best business they can be. So work with someone like us, if not us. And really that is that. I think it's the only way to get started successfully with data strategy at the moment. If you aren't already doing it well enough, then you need expertise to get going.
Absolutely. So a couple of questions from the live chat. So Simon asks, do you need all your data in one single giant app to benefit from these tools? And if we're just winging it on Google Sheets and Dropbox, is that good enough?
Yeah, absolutely. So you don't need to centralize everything. You can have, in terms of when we talk about this siloed data, it's fine to have different data sources in different places, as long as they are at some point being combined and analyzed together. So Power BI, if we go back to what I know best and something we use quite a lot, Power BI can connect to multiple data sources and create data sets, which is sort of combining and aggregating that data into one place that is a sort of a verified source of data that everyone can use for reporting. That can be made up of lots of different things. So Google Sheets is actually really well integrated into Power BI. It's probably even better than Excel, but don't come after me, Microsoft, for that. I think Google Sheets is great. If you just want to have the flexibility of real-time sort of just dumping figures into a Excel-style sort of spreadsheet workbook application, Google Sheets is great. And you don't need to, because you've chosen Power BI, you don't need to go with Microsoft Office and SharePoint and Dynamics. It can be anything, it can be really open. And yeah, if the best place for that data for every other reason in the business is to put it in a Google Sheet, keep it in a Google Sheet. Don't change the way you work to suit the data practice. The data practice needs to get the data from the right places, aggregate that and combine that into a central sort of verified trusted source that anyone can then analyze and build reports from.
Right. I think one of the things that I'm hearing is that data definitely shouldn't be treated as its own thing. It needs to be treated as part of a business strategy, that overall overarching level in terms of how it can transform businesses. Simon asked a great question, and actually, if you were to start to implement a data strategy, what kind of things do you need to think about from a staffing perspective? I mean, in your experience, Andy, what do you think are the key roles that a business must have? Yeah,
so if we're looking at the latest, greatest version of this, where we're talking about every person in a team, every role within a business has access to the right data sources, then not only is it a staffing consideration from hiring in new roles like a CDO, but you need to have training across the business as well. So I'd say that at the C-suite level, you need to have someone that's responsible for the data use.
So if someone's not responsible for the data right now, that needs to be an action.
Yeah, you need a CDO, CDIO, lots of roles have that kind of data element in, and it needs to be from the very top. If not, if it's a much smaller company that doesn't have the heads at that level, whoever is the COO or the CIO needs to consider data at the top table as part of the things that they manage. It's not an after the fact kind of thing that you have to manage because it's a challenge of operating one of the softwares that you use. It's as important as deciding what technology you're going to use and what systems you're going to use for various things. Also, how you're going to handle the data for everything needs to be at that top table, that consideration. And then hiring through the business, data analysts and business analysts are a massive value to really understand the insight from this, because it's great saying we've got this new technology and everyone gets access to the data. Not everyone can then ingest that and pull insights from that. So having specialists and experts that can really understand what the commercial kind of implementation or considerations are from raw data and translate that into something that's useful, they're really key. And then it's about training and upskilling everyone in the business to really be able to do the same thing. So, and once you've worked at a company that's done that, like everyone that works at Wirehive here is empowered to go and run their own reports and look at new things and ask new questions of data. Moving to any business in the future, they will be able to work with any kind of existing practices like that to be able to do that better. I'm sure as people move around, that's going to spread throughout the businesses as well. But yeah, in terms of roles, someone at the boardroom needs to be responsible for data, and it needs to flow down through the business in terms of everything you do from the culture of the business to training and development. Any key considerations really there.
And that curiosity, I guess.
Yeah.
To ask more.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you. So James in the audience, it's the last question apparently from him. I don't mind if it's not. But many organisations that he speaks to believe they already have a data strategy. But is there a litmus test, I guess that's what it says, that you can do as an employee or employer to check if you really do have one? That's a great question, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think a lot of businesses will say that they have a strategy for data, but that strategy might be data retention policies of we keep data for 7 years and that we're compliant with GDPR and security of data is restricted to just the IT team or whoever needs it on a leased principle. So that is a strategy, but it's not what we're talking about when we talk about strategy. It's like when the business plans out what it wants to do in the next 3 years, 5 years, are they then, the next question is how we know we're going to get there, and how could we make sure that we get there by getting more and more insights about our customers and making sure that we achieve our goals. So a litmus test, I think we've talked about it already, but can you put your hands on the data? Like we can in our roles. I know absolutely we can. So if anyone out there is working for a business that you get told how well you've done by the board or by your line manager, but you can't actually see it for yourself day in, day out until you have that monthly or quarterly meeting, that is when we're talking about you need to sort your data strategy out. So you might already have one, but it's probably not good enough in this day and age, really. Right. So in terms of litmus test, can you touch it? Can you go right now and run a report on how well your department or even another department is doing versus some other kind of data set that you want to combine with that? If you can't do that, then work needs to happen, I think, to further up the chain to make sure that can happen.
And the assessment you spoke about that's going to form part of that workshop in a few weeks' time, will that answer some of those questions? Yeah,
so that's basically kind of a current state assessment where we look at the best practices now with working with data, and it's a very honest assessment of where our business is at, and also their ambitions. So there's a targeted score of where we think we can take a business. So if the scores are out of 5, for example, we don't expect any business to get 5s across the board, but we expect maybe to take them from a 1 to a 3 based on what's feasible with their budgets and what their ambitions are and this current setup of the business over 90 days or something like that. So
gains to be made by everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone could be doing something better. I think if you're watching this today, then hopefully there's obviously considerations and thoughts going on there that you're looking to improve something with data. Anyone else that's not watching that thinks they're doing good enough, they're probably not. They're probably not doing good enough. If you think you've got a data strategy and it's good enough, or if you think you're doing fine, that's generally a really bad sign that you're not only getting it wrong and making bad decisions, but you're also not considering how things can be improved. So that's a more difficult customer to work with. But then as soon as someone comes across to like a data and AI workshop, that everyone comes for the AI. I don't think anyone has ever come to our data and AI workshops for the data, but the data is how you do the AI. And I think that's always a big eye opener. I was like, this is amazing. How do we do all these things? Well, data.
You have that.
You've got data, but your data is in the wrong place.
Yeah.
It's all named wrong, badly handled. But that's fine because everyone's in the same state there. There's lots of businesses that are in the complete same boat that need to address the way they store data, make it sure it's available, accessible to everyone, and managed in a way that you can do these amazing things that we see.
Definitely. And actually, to one of Simon's questions that he's asked, with so much SaaS in use, how do you make sure that you don't lock data into silos? Yeah,
so I mean, one of the huge things is when you manage your suppliers and when you vet a solution of being sort of, can we use this new SaaS technology, even if that's something as simple as like a HR solution or something like that, is that data stored in the cloud that is not accessible in its raw format to the business that's using it? Most of the time, yes. So when you look at a great example of this is like Sitecore Cloud and Umbraco move into their cloud solution, and there's lots of cloud versions of the infrastructure that you use for hosting websites now. And a lot of the vendors are pushing people that way in terms of the pricing for the licensing and things. It's quite a competitive thing, and it's quite an incentive to move to their cloud versions. But you need to be very careful in looking at the kind of terms and conditions and looking at how much data you'll be able to get your hands on if you're hosting it in a SaaS version, which is software as a service.
So even if it's your data, do you own it? Can you control it?
Yeah, absolutely. And making sure that whichever solution you're choosing from a SaaS perspective, understanding if there's APIs that you can engage with to make sure that you can extract that data or even just analyze it in place where it is really key part of assessing or evaluating any kind of software choice these days.
Thank you. So we've got another question from Simon. His question is, it sounds like an obvious place to start, and that's with finance and other number-centric parts of the business. What kind of training can you recommend to these sorts of roles? And how do they start?
So finance is huge.
They're all
Finance,
whizzes in Excel though, right?
yeah. So there's nothing wrong with Excel for a start. That is data analytics, and a lot of the role in finance is making use of that. And historically, they've through necessity, they are some of the best users of data in any business, really. But understanding the technology that's there, that if you can use Excel, you can use Power BI. If you start to use Power BI on top of what you're doing in Excel, not instead of, but just, well, let's see what this looks like in Power BI and just visualize that. Instead of making a chart in Excel, just use Power BI for that chart, for example. By default in Power BI, if you double click in white space, you can start typing a question in. And that question is using natural language processing to understand from typing in a name of a noun that's maybe referenced in the data, it'll understand what column that's in, and it will start to build out its own way of ingesting that data for you. So you can literally type a sentence in, it will go in through your data sources and understand which ones it thinks you're talking about, pull them in, and looking at the shape and size of that data, it will automatically recommend which chart is best. So, that's show me the sales results over the last 5 years. It can see that it's time series, so it will go with a line chart or a bar chart, something like that. Yeah, it's awesome. And if you can use Excel and you can type a sentence in, you'll be blown away by Power BI straight away. So for finance, you're already doing the right things. I think there's work to be done potentially in various businesses with the level of technology that's being used. For example, we've got automated credit check processing through a credit check provider that uses an API. Technology is there to massively improve the lives of people that spend most of their day in Excel. So if you're still spending the most of your day in Excel, there's probably technology that can help with that. And you have a really unique perspective on the business, having access to everything you have in finance, to be a key role in the kind of insights and business intelligence reported to the board. So if you don't have a team of data scientists and specialists in business intelligence and data analysts, your finance team are the key to start with, to make sure that they have the tools they need to provide not just what the board is asking for, but, here's a new thing actually we've spotted this week in what we've done, and we're seeing a trend here, or we've now compared these two completely siloed data sets together, and wouldn't you believe it? Look at this, how this aligns, and there's a whole new thing that we've learned. So finance is a great example of where you can start, particularly for smaller businesses that don't have the roles already in place to go and do data analytics.
Right, and I guess with the likes of Power BI and AWS's like Quick Start and so on, are there lots of online training available?
Yeah, huge amount. Most of it's free as well, which helps. And if not, there's sessions like the dashboard in a day that we do for Power BI, and I am sure we'll be doing one very soon for AWS QuickSight for any of our AWS customers as well. So yeah, watch this space for things like that. But yeah, there's lots of training online, particularly there from the Power BI side. There's MS Learn that has sort of endless training and advice on there completely for free for particular roles as well. Like data analytics role was put onto the professional learning paths for Microsoft as well, which was a really good thing. Yeah, there's lots out there, and the community stuff with Power BI is very good as well. So
Ask your peers.
Nice. Kind of like a developer sitting in Stack Overflow looking for assistance. There's that community spirit out there for anyone that's using these kind of tools to work together and compare custom visualizations that they've built and things like that, and share that. So yeah, lots of training and things you can do.
So we've got a couple more questions to get through that I can see, but we are heading up towards the top of the hour with about 10 minutes remaining. Thank you so much, guys, for checking us out today. So James has said that data should be considered as important as cash and human resources in terms of an asset to a business in that case. Do you agree with that comment?
Yeah, I think it needs to be considered as an asset.
Yeah.
So different to cash and human resources, but it's one of the assets. So
yeah. We've spoken about it being a first-class citizen. So
yeah,
it needs to be.
The investment in data and what you're doing with that data needs to be potentially considered as an asset on the profit and loss kind of register, that kind of thing. It's that important, and yeah, improving your use of data, productizing it into things that people can consume. So rather than just having data somewhere, it becomes a report that everyone can see and it's human readable. It becomes potentially monetized in its own right because you're sharing it with clients. For example, there's work we've done with a client of ours, Lee Barron, who's looking to work with the kind of property management that they do, and open up the kind of the very internal facing reporting they were doing on some old technology to completely re-energize that in a way that in time, once the new process is live, they'll be able to give client-facing reports with much more detail and much better insights as to how the business is working and how they're managing properties for customers. That's a really exciting one.
That's probably a great segue, actually. So many people that are familiar with Wirehive may have heard of our vodcast, which is Wirelive, that's run, I think, every 3 to 4 weeks now. Our next Wirelive is happening on the 1st of October, right, Andy? I think it's at 10 o'clock. That's when I believe Rob, our CEO, will be interviewing Lee Barron about some of their projects. I mean, can you give us any sneak peeks, Andy?
Yes, I mean, that project was really exciting. So we looked at initially their existing reporting practices, and then essentially looking at how the latest technology. They were already aware of Power BI, and they said we absolutely need this. But it was an absolute pleasure working with the guys there and taking them on a journey from understanding how the rest of the business kind of needs to be involved and how you can democratize the data and insights there across the business. Ultimately, in a real world kind of way of doing it is making them a differentiator in the market of how they do business and how they are beating the competition by providing much better insights and much better level of intelligence on the service they provide for their customers. So they are very much reinventing themselves in the way that they handle data, becoming the Netflix, not the Blockbuster of property management for clients. So it's great to have them on, and yeah, I can't wait to watch.
Sounds like a great session.
Yeah,
so be sure to check it out next week, guys. So to the point of asking you anything, Andy, Simon has asked us anything, and it's, what are your top beard tips? I mean, that is very important.
Beard tips.
Yeah.
Just let it grow. I mean, you need to trim the edges. You need to shampoo and condition. That's important. Especially
So it's a bit like data. You need to look after it.
Yeah. Okay. If we're going to do a data comparison, it's about nurturing the data in your beard. Lockdown helps. Lockdown really helps with the beard growth, I think. But yeah, the beard is also the power. I say anyone talking with a beard kind of has the sort of
the knowledge,
the initial respect until they start talking, at least that they know what they're doing, and then you open your mouth and then you need to convince people in other ways. But top beard tips. Let it go as much as you like, as long as you trim it back and sort the edges out. Yeah.
Enough about beards.
I think it is.
And is there any other topics that you'd like to pick up on today that we've maybe not touched on already?
Right, jellyfish.
Jellyfish.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So there's through some of the content for the data strategy workshop in particular, I've been looking at sort of parallels to draw from the animal kingdom, and one that there's a couple that are in there so far, but I'm trying to build out as I go. But so far in my collection are two. So jellyfish don't have a brain, and that's not just me being rude to the jellyfish out there watching. Jellyfish don't have brains. It's a fact, confirmed. We've checked. And what's really interesting is that the system they have a nervous system that essentially is taking real-time raw data and instinctively reacting to it. And if only businesses could run like jellyfish and not overthink things and just trust the data that's coming in, I think they'd be in a better place. But that's not to say we should not apply any kind of logical thinking on top of the data, but just understanding that there is organisms out there that take data in through the tentacles, or however other organisms want to do it, and they react to that without having to think about it, without overcomplicating things. Jellyfish are a great example for me of the world out there that's using data outside of business and humans. And the second one is dolphins.
Okay.
So dolphins have absolutely fascinating ability for echolocation. Some of the best kind of use of data you see in the animal kingdom. But and I think I'd like to keep the theme of like marine life. So if you can think of any others, that'd be great. But dolphins have got an excellent sense of echolocation. They all have that. So imagine a business out there that's not doing data strategy. Imagine that's the king dolphin that can do the echolocation, and the rest of the dolphins in the pod are blind. They don't have the echolocation, but they trust the king dolphin.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how dolphins work. the dolphins are extremely effective at hunting prey and going about the way that life that they do, and they're perceived to be extremely intelligent because of the way that they work and they have that social interaction. And that is really key to sort of compare to business. So opening up your data so that everyone has that skill, everyone has the raw data, every dolphin in the pod has the echolocation ability, and they still work together as a team is kind of the best example I've got to. So that's the pinnacle of the animal comparisons. Jellyfish are down here, like you were reacting to data, and there's probably room for something in between. But really like the kind of the thought of comparing humans to dolphins in terms of the way that everyone has this ability to go and use it, but typically business is set up in a way that IT is taking away that echolocation ability for everyone, and there's a king dolphin that says we must do this because I've decided that that's the way. But actually that's not how dolphins are working, and certainly not how jellyfish are working. So we need to, I think, take some advice from what's around us in the animal kingdom sometimes, just how efficient things can be done, because they've evolved to be as effective as they could possibly be.
Well, we've got a question, I think probably the last question for the hour. So thank you, VJ. And I totally agree. Be more jellyfish or be more dolphin, however you want to be. But there is an element of archaic thinking within businesses, right? What would be the single most important tip for businesses to become more jellyfish?
I love this. This is
you didn't think it was going to take this kind of route,
yeah,
no?
It was just this casual aside that I wanted to throw in. But yeah, being more jellyfish, I think there needs to be a book I start writing or something.
Absolutely.
But, being more jellyfish from businesses, I think it's looking at the data and what you can know. So putting things out there on the table. So what systems do you have? Where is the data? And the next level beneath that is what can you learn from every type of data set that you have. So a call center will have call recordings. That's great. So we've got an audio file. We've got a fax machine that's receiving faxes. But a step down from that, what you can learn from that, understand that there's artificial intelligence technologies that can help break that down even more. So for a call recording, you can understand who is speaking from voice recognition. You can understand an exact transcript to text of the audio file that's there, so you can automatically understand the words in a text file. From that text file, you can get sentiment analysis of whether someone was being positive or negative. You can pick out key topics and key things they were saying, and understand the sentiment of those specific topics as well. So all of a sudden, you've got an audio file that's completely useless that maybe you look at if a customer complains about a call a week ago. Instead, think of that as a data set that you can extract as much knowledge as possible from that file using the latest technology and put that in a system that then you can react to it. So all of a sudden, you've got a live dashboard next to your call center, and if a call is identified that a customer was negative about a particular thing, there's a red light flashing, and someone can investigate that, and you can call that customer back maybe within 5 minutes and say, look, so you were really disappointed with this call, or you're unhappy with this particular product that we're selling. Just to let you know, we care and we're on top of this. That makes a massive difference to the service you're providing, and you're being more jellyfish. You're reacting in real time to that raw data that's available to you, rather than just shutting it off, storing it in a box somewhere, and not really caring about what's in that data. So yeah, that's
have
the first
data,
thing.
make there be outcomes, be reactive.
Yeah.
Great.
That's the slogan for the book, I guess.
So be more jellyfish, guys.
Be more jellyfish, coming soon next year.
So thank you for joining us this morning. We are almost at time. I guess what I'd like to just do is say thank you to Andy, and thank you to all our participants that have joined us on today's live chat. I hope we've answered your questions. If you have any more, then do please feel free to send them through to myself and Andy. We will be running the Wirehive on the 1st of October, just as a recap, at 10 a.m. with Lee Barron. Following that, on the 21st of October, please check out our data strategy in a day. We'll be sending out more information. So please follow Wirehive on YouTube for more details. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.